And good afternoon, friends. Welcome. This is Stand to Reason, and I'm your host today, Jon Noyes, filling in for the amazing Greg Koukl. And I'm not alone today in studio. I'm going to bring my colleague Tim Barnett on in a minute. But before that, I just want to make sure that you guys up front get the phone number to give us a call here at Stand to Reason. You can give us a call locally at 855-243-9975, or if you have the fortune of living internationally, you can call us at 562-424-8229. And if you send your questions in through the website, you don't have to wait for us to get back to you. You could just call with those questions right now. And I also just want to point out something before we dig into the topic. We're going to be talking about deconversion stories today for you, but I want to make you aware of something that I'm actually starting here. My next project at Stand to Reason, I'm really excited about. Starting June 30th, I'm going to be hosting a new live Facebook and YouTube video experience on the last Wednesday of every month. It's at 6 p.m. That's my time, Pacific time. And it's going to be called To The Point Live with Jon Noyes. And I'm going to be taking your questions during the latter sections of that live session. And we're going to discover and explore topics that are relevant to our culture today from an apologetics point of view. We're going to hit up stuff like relativism, New Testament reliability, atheism, intelligent design, and one of the topics that's been most popular, I guess, I don't know if popular is the right word, but one of the topics that has been most requested that I speak on is suicide and the problem of evil. We'll be talking about those two things as well. And with that intro, guys, I would love to now bring on Tim Barnett. Is Tim, are you there?
I am. Speaking of people who are international, that's me right here. Yeah.
That is you. It's Tim is coming live from Canada. It's so great.
That's
to
right.
See, it takes two apologists to cover for one Greg Koukl. It's amazing.
You know what? We got to talk a little bit together about the topic that we're going to be discussing. And I told you could do this all on your own, man. You got a lot to say. But I'm just happy to come along for the ride, to ride shotgun with you. I think we're going to have a lot of fun over the next hour. And I'm really looking forward to this new project you have going, the To The Point. Man, there are so many issues that are really, often difficult concepts for people to get their minds around. And so to have someone kind of take you by the hand and say, kind of, here's the main point in this particular issue, I think that's really clever. I think it's really needed today in particular to help people kind of understand the main ideas, the big ideas that we're facing.
Ah, shucks. Thanks, man. That's the goal, is to really kind of dig in an abbreviated fashion, though. So, I mean, to the point, 15 minutes in and out, and then spend the majority of the time dealing with people's questions, hopefully providing answers, and really just exploring the Christian worldview together in the context of a focused, centralized, relevant topic.
Yeah.
And I can't actually think of right now a topic that's maybe even, man, it's for me at least, it's one of the most relevant topics that's out there, and it has to do with these deconstruction stories, these deconversion stories. And before we really dig in, I just kind of want to explain what I mean by that, because I think maybe a lot of us and a lot of the listeners, maybe they don't know what we're talking about. But there's been this trend recently of Christian artists or pastors or authors and sons or daughters of famous pastors, people in the public eye who were once Christian. They're coming out publicly as saying, I am no longer a Christian. I have deconstructed or deconverted. There's even been a hashtag that came from it. It's exegetical, or I can't even say it.
Exvangelical, yeah,
Exvangelical.
That's right, yeah.
And I think that this stuff's important on a number of levels to be talking about it. And I think that we should be concerned about these. But I want to draw a distinction as we get up front. We kind of talked about this at our mentor moment before the show during our staff meeting here at STR, is there's a difference between being worried about something and being concerned. We don't need to worry about this because God is sovereign and God is always good. He's always loving. And I know that God's plan is the perfect plan. So we want to set these like parameters, these boundaries, at least for me when I'm wrestling with these things and other things in general. I set them within my theological context. And once you get your theology there and you let those serve as your bookends, kind of I look at it like those bumpers that you put down in the bowling alley so you can't get it into the gutter, so you lay that groundwork, God's sovereignty, God's love, God's goodness, God's justice. And now we're free to explore this stuff. And I think it's really important because these deconversion stories are really impacting our culture, especially our youth. I'm kind of like heartbroken, and you guys are going to get that. I think I'm going to express myself here on this issue. But, I grew up in a time, and Tim, we're about the same age. We grew up in a time where we used to watch TGIF Friday, sitcoms at night. You watch Family Matters with Steve Urkel, and you related to these characters, and you waited to the next week to see the update. Is he gonna ask Laura out on the date? And this is like how we experienced a television show. We became related to these characters, but they remained characters. We knew that there were actors and actresses, that they were playing the part, and it wasn't real life. It was more of a distraction, if anything else. Well, nowadays, kids are entertaining themselves. Teens, millennials, and younger are watching YouTube. I mean, that is, my kids at least, their primary form of entertainment when they're allowed to do it. I mean, we have rules in my house. Is they love to go on YouTube and watch a couple of their favorite YouTube channels, and these are families, real families. I mean, I don't know how much of it's scripted or not, but it's certainly closer to real life than was Family Matters or Cheers or MASH or any of these shows that I grew up with. And what's happened, and I'm noticing, is that my kids even, my oldest is 11, my youngest is 4, they form a relationship, a bond with these people that they're watching through the screen. And they have it's more, an illusion is what I want to say, but it's more than illusion, because they are sharing their real life. And you get somebody, and I'm going to throw a bunch of names here, but like Rhett and Link, they have a deconversion story, both of them shared. You have these personalities who are big, but they're in the context of their shows showing what their real life looks like. And so we're relating to them, and our kids are relating to them. And then all of a sudden they come out with these, hour and a half long program of why I'm no longer a Christian. And there's impact there. Yeah. And I pastor a small little church here in Southern California, Soli Church. And man, I've had kids, parents come up to me and say, "Hey, Jon, I am like really wrestling with how do I respond to these things?" And what's interesting, Tim, is it's not from a actually strictly apologetic perspective either. These parents and these teens aren't necessarily wrestling with the problem of evil or the other reasons, reliability of the New Testament. So they know their arguments, they know their stuff, they're trained, they're Stand to Reason fans. They go to our website, they get equipped. It's more of the relational. This is an emotional thing that's happening, and I can't believe it, and how do I process through it? And as I was been thinking about this stuff, I think that we need to be careful here, and this is kind of my first, I guess, launching off point, and then Tim, feel free to butt in.
Sure.
We got to be careful how we respond to these stories. My first initial reaction is always to combat them with arguments. Are you kidding me? The problem of evil? I mean, we have, dude, Tim, how many articles have you written on the problem of evil? I mean, countless. You and Greg
Sure.
did a mentor series on hell, a whole, a solid ground on hell, 3-parter, I think. And, or historicity of the New Testament. I mean, go on and watch the Ehrman-Lacona debates. There's 3 or 4 of them now that are 3 hours each. And these things have been answered. But behind every one of these objections, behind every one of these questions is a person. And these are real people. And this is really where I get tied up and tied into this, is that they're not just arguments. That would be easy. It's easy to answer the arguments, in my opinion. Where I get tied up is that there's an immortal soul there. And when I hear of the deconstruction of someone, my heart really does kind of break for that individual, and it breaks In light of, well, the scriptures, mainly, I just see Paul, for example, his lament in Romans over the Jews who were rejecting Christ. They've become accursed and cut off from Christ, and that just like, it really breaks my heart. And so this is kind of like why I want to talk about this issue with with you, Tim, especially because, well, I mean, you serve in your local church, right? Primarily with youth. What do you think the effects that these guys are having are to the youth?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're onto something here. There's this when we hear these stories, there is something so powerful about an individual we look up to. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of it just so happens, and I'm not sure why it is exactly, but a lot of worship artists. Yeah. So you have guys like Marty Sampson. This was a number of years ago. Hillsong guy, one of my favorite kind of contemporary worship choruses. Oh, praise the name. That's him. You have guys like Hawk Nelson's, John Steingard. You have there's a latest guy from DC Talk. I grew up listening to DC Talk. You didn't. You were an atheist. But I was raised in the church. And so, man, we would be at camp blasting DC Talk, Jesus Freak, all that stuff, And then you got, I didn't know who Rhett and Link were until, all this stuff came out with the deconversion, because I wasn't, into all that. But these are influencers, right? And when you have an influencer who shares their story and describes how they've moved from Christianity to something else, and sometimes it's atheism, sometimes it's something different, progressive theology or something. It's like and Greg Koukl has talked about this in the past. You hear the story and you wonder, man, what did they know that I don't know?
Yeah.
Is there something that, they got some insight, and that if I learn about that, then I'll walk away too. So there's the story is so powerful, in particular, I think, to the next generation, because they crave, you talk about Gen Z, they're looking at things like authenticity. And you mentioned that, these guys who are running YouTube channels like Rhett and Link, it's like you get to know the person. You've never met them in real life, and yet you feel like you know them. And oftentimes we talk to people at conferences, John, or at churches, and they come up to us and it's like, hey, Tim, and they feel like they know us because they've watched our videos and read our articles and this kind of thing. And so there's something about, how the internet has just connected people on a deeper level, especially young people. And so I think that this is having a huge impact, in particular on young people. And so we ought to be able to give a response. And I think that's what we're going to do over the next, hour. Maybe not particularly answering the apologetic arguments. That is for another time. And we've done that on the website, as you mentioned. But why is it that they're deconverting, and how do we respond? So my kids are a little young now, but I'm thinking about, when my kids are 16, 17, 18, if they came to me and said, Dad, I no longer believe this stuff, and they're on some kind of deconversion, deconstruction journey, what would I say? What kind of questions would I have? And I think that's what's going to be the value of this conversation together, is maybe giving people who are in a situation like that, where they have a brother, a sister, a family friend, or whoever, coworker, who is going through this process of deconstruction. What is it that we can offer? What is it that we can say? What kind of questions can we ask?
Yeah. One of the things that I brought up to you yesterday when we were kind of chatting about this is, it's so ironic to be sitting on this side of the issue, because not too long ago, I was an atheist. And the experiences that these Christian guys, these Christian men and women are saying now, having deconverted, is almost the same exact experience that I had as an atheist, and it's the same objections, only different. It's like I would have brought up, oh well, you can't trust the Bible. It's not, it's not historically reliable. But then I did really in-depth research into it, and I did a lot of reading, and was reading Habermas and Lacona and all these guys, Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict, and then I'm wrestling with it, and I'm coming at it from a completely different perspective, and I'm like, so I had a deconversion, but the complete opposite, from atheism into Christianity, centered around the same things. So in my mind, it's causing, like, I'm just thinking to myself, man, like, what? I don't understand what it is that's causing these guys to leave, because the answers are there. I mean, they're there. And my first question that I'm trying to wrestle with is what exactly is it? What exactly is it that they're leaving? What is it that Rhett and Link and these guys from DC Talk? I thought that was a radio station until recently, man. I thought it was like a radio station. I didn't, like you said, I didn't grow up in the church, so I didn't listen to any Christian music ever. Like, I still don't really listen to Christian music, so I have like no idea. But I listen to some of these guys, and some of them give. John Steingard, for example, he was a lead singer of a band, and he's done a number of now interviews with Josh McDowell and Sean McDowell, and he was on the Unbelievable podcast, and he does a great job of explaining himself, and he seems very genuine, and he seems like he's really searching for this stuff. But the question that I don't think's been really asked to him is what are you leaving? What have you actually tried true Christianity? And I'm not trying to, like, I wish people could know my heart on this. I really do. You guys saw a little bit of it at staff, because this stuff, I am emotionally involved in this. I have a huge heart for people. I'm a pastor, a lay pastor. It's not my full-time job. I don't get paid. But, like, I care for people, and I have a desire to shepherd people. So when I hear of people deconverting and leaving the faith, my heart gets broken for them deeply. But then my intellectual side starts like kind of digging in, have they actually tried true Christianity? And I'm not talking about, the American politicized cultural Christianity, or I'm not, like you mentioned, I'm not talking about the progressive Christianity, or that's like a Christianity that picks and chooses what they believe, or the Christianity that focuses on like social justice, but at the same time they end up ignoring God's ultimate justice found in the cross of Christ. I'm talking about a Christianity that doesn't fit neatly into a political system, or one I'm talking about one that's constantly pushing you and me, challenging us to look more and more like Jesus. It doesn't fit neatly into a box, because I feel like oftentimes when I'm hearing these guys, I feel like what they're doing is they're expecting everything in the worldview to be perfectly ordered, stackable, wrapped up with a nice, neat little bow. And then all of a sudden they realize, wait a second, it's not like that. It's messy. And they jump ship. I'm wondering, and then when they start to describe their experiences, as they describe what it is that they're leaving, it sounds to me more like a popular or a cultural Christianity, as opposed to an Orthodox Christianity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, John, I think you're making a really important distinction here. And I know some people are going to take it the wrong way, who's John to judge their Christianity or something. But here, let's play this out for a minute. Let's just use Tim Barnett as an example, okay?
I like him.
So Tim Barnett grew up in the church. Doors were open, we were there, that kind of deal. Youth group, Sunday school, the camps, we did it all. And yet, in my high school days, I lived like everybody else. We were partying. I think I mentioned this to you. Like, we would, my
Say
brother
it
and I.
Ain't so, Tim. Say it ain't so.
Yeah, we were only 1 year apart, my brother and I, and we would party, until 3 a.m. In my last 2 years of high school on Saturday night, and yet we would get up for church the Sunday morning, because we loved our mom. That's why we were there. And so it didn't matter if we got 4 hours sleep or what. So, drinking the whole thing. And so if you were to ask that Tim, let's say at 19 years old, Tim, are you a Christian? I probably would have said, yeah, I go to church. My parents are Christians. Yeah, I'm a Christian. Yeah. And if that Tim were to deconstruct and leave the faith. And people would say, "Whoa, I know Tim. That's a church kid. That guy he's inviting people to the youth group. He's doing all that." They would be like, "Wow." So there's that Tim, the 19-year-old Tim.
Sure.
And then there's let's say I'm 38 now. 38-year-old Tim decides to deconstruct. There is, I hope everyone can tell that there is going to be a serious difference between those two stories. What is 19-year-old Tim leaving, and what is 38-year-old Tim leaving? And those are very different things. Okay,
and that's what I feel like I feel like the people that I've seen interviewing these deconstruction, the people who have deconstructed, they're not asking that.
Yeah.
Or when they do, the answers that they're giving are, well, look at me. I was, serving in the church. I was a pastor. I was an author. I was a speaker. I was out on a missions trip. It seems it's awfully works based. I mean, it's up to, it seems to me like I know I was a Christian because I was doing X, Y, or Z. And that's the major component of being a Christian, of identifying with Christ, I think is missing. And that's the grace of God. But before that is our fallenness and brokenness. I've never once heard one of them, say that, well, I came to a moment in my life where I realized that I'm a sinner in desperate need of a savior. Yeah. I realized that the world around me is made a certain way, and it's crying out for justice, and it's not a justice that's found in the ACLU. It's not a justice that's found in politicized movements. It's a justice that's above all that. And I've never once heard any of them kind of express that and then express their need for Jesus in those terms. And I'm not talking about like a singular moment in somebody's life. That's not the way it happened with you. That's not the way it happened with me. My salvation. It wasn't a feeling. It was at the end of many months of deep study and really wrestling. I mean, with God on these major issues. So I'm not talking about not everybody doesn't need this conversion story.
Sure.
That they could say, oh, well, on June 9th. I mean, some of us have that, on June 9th, 1992, I became a Christian. I mean, that's fantastic, but that's not my story. That's not your story. Yeah. But we still have a firm grasp of what the gospel is. And that maybe that's what I'm saying is like, that's what's missing, Tim, is I feel like the gospel from these people's lives is just missing. And that further breaks my heart, man. It's just like, God is so stinking good. And the love that and I'm going to get experiential here. I'm not meaning to, but like the love that God has bestowed upon me. I know who I was before Jesus. And from all worldly measures, I was a good man. I was, successful, or at least on my way to success, working at one of the nation's best law firms. I was making decent money. I was living in Hollywood, having fun, on my way, but in the hindsight, I look back at my lifestyle and I was like, oh my gosh, I was a wretch, like, and God reached down into the dark, dank bars of Hollywood, and ripped me up into His marvelous light, and He never lets me go. Yeah. And there's nothing that can separate you from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus, is what the scriptures say, and that's just overpowering to me. And then when I couple that with hearing these guys' stories, oh man, I just don't get the feeling that they knew. I just don't get the feeling that they really knew that love. Because me personally, I can't countenance turning my back on Jesus. Yeah. I'm not saying they weren't Christians. I'm not trying to place that kind of judgment on them. But for me, prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. That hymn, every time I sing it, tears come to my eyes because I understand the temptation, but I also understand that God's love is never ending. He doesn't give up on us like we give up on Him, and He's constantly pulling us back. So I'm wondering if they knew that as they were deconverting. So
this, I think, Jon, is a really good insight. It's if you're talking with someone and they're describing going through a process of deconstruction or deconversion, why not ask the question? What are you leaving is how you put it. But you could give precise, more like, so do you understand what you're getting at? Is, do you really understand the gospel? And because it may be that you're not really leaving Christianity, you're leaving a counterfeit. You're leaving something that isn't the real deal. And that, I think, it's a genuine question, like I said, with asking the 19-year-old Tim what he's leaving, if that was the case. Another point, and this piggybacks on something that you've been describing here. And I had this insight, we spoke yesterday on the phone, just kind of throwing some stuff around here about what we might talk about. And it occurred to me this morning in the shower of all places, I'm just thinking about stuff, and here this came to my mind. You described this experience of how you've experienced God and the love of God, and just how that, oftentimes, and people who are listening should know, Jon, you are so authentic and so real. There are times when you are literally moved to tears when you're talking about this, and I've been there. I've experienced those moments, and you have just a deep understanding of the riches, the mercies of God. And what occurred to me was, if you want to think of it like this, think of it like a marriage. If I decided tomorrow to leave my wife, okay, and my 3 beautiful daughters, or if my wife decided to leave me, and our 3 kids, or whatever, you just think of that situation where you have a marriage, just a deep love, and the next day, gone. What if I were to ask, let's say you were to ask me, Tim, what are you leaving? What are you leaving? And I say, well, I'm leaving 3 kids, and I'm leaving a wife. And they say, no, Tim, I'm not just asking a number of family members. Like, what are you leaving? I'm like, well, I left my X number of square foot house, and I left my Acura RDX, 10 years old. It's in the driveway still. They're like, Tim, this is not making any sense to me, because you're not really describing what family is. You're just describing stuff. You would obviously see that there's something wrong there. I don't really. Where's the love? Where's the Tim just completely broken because he's leaving behind this thing that was so beautiful, this thing that he, consumed his entire life, his world, is his 3 daughters and his wife. And so, I haven't fully played this out in my mind, and I worked all this out, but I think there's something akin to that, when someone has truly tasted and seen, the Lord, there's gotta be a brokenness when you go through that deconstruction and that or deconversion, if it was really there, and so I think maybe thinking in terms of that kind of relationship, that marriage relationship, is helpful in thinking through this, and just the impact that turning away from that kind of Christianity, what that would look like.
Yeah, right there, something came to my mind as you were talking about that. It's the difference, and it's cliche. I think it's cliche, but it's the difference between knowing about God and knowing God.
Yeah,
there's a difference there. I did a atheist role play a couple weeks back at a major Christian high school, Oaks Christian School in Thousand Oaks, or Westlake Village here in Southern California, and it's like the premier Christian high school and middle school. And it was really great. I had the stage was set. They had me on a stage with 12 to 15 students with chairs set up, and the format was 12 or 15 versus 1. And I was going to be an atheist, and they were the Christian apologists. And leading up to this, man, oh my gosh, guys, leading up to this, they read Koukl's Tactics. They read Strobel's Strobel's Case for the Resurrection, and they read 2 or 3 other apologetic titles, and they studied and they labored and they had all their arguments on paper. And I got up there and I gave my case as to why I don't believe in God, and we had an absolute ball. And then what kind of surprised me is afterwards I went to dinner with the students and the teacher, and they were so gracious, and everybody there was so amazing. I had such a wonderful time. But I was talking to a couple of the students off on the side, and they told me that they weren't believers. And I remember I was talking to one of them, and I'm just like, but you were like the best one. Like, you were constantly at the microphone telling me why I was wrong, that you can trust the Bible, and that you know that Jesus was raised from the dead because of X, Y, and Z, and laying down the arguments. But he didn't know God, but he knew a lot about God. You know, and actually, you know what? Fortunately, a success story is that kid, after our conversation, he ended up coming to Christ, and he got baptized 3 days later, which is so cool. And he came to my church, and I'm having coffee with him hopefully later this week before he goes off to college. And so there's a big success there. But that's the difference between knowing about God and knowing who God is. And one of the other things that kind of in the context of what we're talking about, one of the other things that kind of just really kind of just gets to me is I feel like if we truly understand who God is, we know his word, and we run to him, we'd see that even the Christianity that I know invites intellectual wrestling. It invites doubting even. I'm going to say the D word. You know, it's not a 4-letter word, doubting. It's not the same as unbelief. Yeah. It's okay to doubt. Yeah. It is. It's okay to wrestle with these. I mean, throughout the scriptures, we see this. We see that we're told to test all things, holding fast to that which is true. I mean, you know, where especially, I mean, think about this, and we'll talk a little bit, like, I think we're going to dive in a little deeper here, but this is especially true. I'm trying to set the stage here. This is especially true when we're trying to understand, like, what are we trying to understand here? We're trying to wrap our minds around an infinite, triune God whose existence and work in the world will always carry with it a semblance of mystery. We're never going to understand the mind of God. But it doesn't mean like we don't wrestle towards that understanding, you know. And I can't think of another faith in another worldview that actually calls for us. I mean, it's calling us, hey, test me on this. You know, you know, test all things, holding fast to that which is true. You know, this is we're Christians, and we're allowed to wrestle and doubt with God. What do you have to say to that?
Oh, I mean, I'm right there with you. I just put together a talk last year on doubt, and you're right. This is, if you look at the common thread through virtually every deconstruction story, deconversion story, there's always talk about doubt. And not feeling safe in expressing doubts, and not feeling safe in asking questions. And at Stand to Reason, we're trying to change that. You know, as we travel from church to church, as we do things like this, we are banging the drum, you know, that it's time for churches to smarten up and start inviting those kinds of questions. Look, the questions don't disappear once you enter the church. In many cases, they intensify. You know, the questions I had before coming to Christ and the questions afterwards, some are the same, but some are even worse, because now I have this God and I got to make sense of, say, evil in the world, or something I'm reading in the Old Testament or whatever. And so they want answers, and it's not going to do anyone any good to simply say, oh, just keep those questions to yourself, or good Christians don't ask questions, or you're a bad Christian because you're doubting. No.
Just believe the Bible. Just believe the Bible. Pray more.
Just believe. I think, sadly, what's happened is some churches have said that. Some pastors have made that claim. And as a result, and this is what all the studies show, okay, one of the biggest destroyers, David Kinnaman from Barnett, he writes about this. He says one of the biggest destroyers of faith is the suppression of doubts. Not doubts in particular, suppression of doubt. In fact, there was another study done by Youth Fuller Institute, I believe, and it was a longitudinal study, and what they found was it was actually students that were able to explore their doubts with someone they trusted that ended up having a strengthened faith on the other end of it. So the way I describe it is, look, doubts, like you said, are not the opposite of faith. The opposite of faith or belief is unbelief. Okay. Doubt is like standing in two canoes. Okay. It's hard enough to stand in one canoe, but the Bible describes it of being like in two minds. So the way I think of it, like the Bible says, James, unstable in all your ways. You're double-minded. So let's imagine two canoes up against each other. Your feet are in each one. Look, you can't stay like that very long, especially when a boat drives by and like knocks you. No, you got, and so you're there. It's not a destination. You got to go somewhere. And this, by the way, is why doubt in the Bible is it's warned against, because doubt is dangerous. It can lead to unbelief, but it doesn't have to lead to unbelief. And as you said, the Bible is full of doubters. Abraham, Moses, David. They jump to the New Testament. You got John the Baptist, who I think we're going to talk about a little bit later. Yeah. You got Thomas, obviously. I mean, the Bible is full. Even Peter, and I mean, there was doubts in exactly. And so let's not shy away from this. We really have an opportunity here to invite those kinds of questions in a safe place, like the youth group or whatever it may be, and explore some of these really difficult questions and not assume we have all the answers, because as Koukl, as our boss likes to say, Christianity is not tidy. Okay, there are some things that we can do our best, but in some cases, God has just not revealed certain things to us, and so we have question marks, in our minds, and I do too. There's some things I'm not so certain about. Okay, but certainty is not like the necessary condition for faith. Okay,
it's not the standard. Yeah.
No. So I think the church can do better when it comes to this issue of questions and doubts, and we need to, if we're going to respond adequately to deconstruction.
One of the things that you're bringing up is and this is how I've heard it recently as I've been doing my reading, is where we want, doubting is okay as long as we don't give in to our doubts. We want to be feeding our faith, not our doubts. So we want to be feasting on proper theology and proper apologetics, and we want to be digesting all of that we can. And one way that we do that is we got to read a ton. We got to be vociferous readers and read widely and read broadly, and that's one way that we can wrestle our way through our questions. I'm not saying you just read Christian material. Don't read the experts on the topics that you're wrestling with. But we need to be feeding our faith, not starving it. And we're about to come up to a break here. So when we come back, I want to make sure that we ask that one question. What are they leaving? I want to make sure that we get to the next question is what's replacing what they're leaving, because nature abhors a vacuum, and there's the worldviews, another worldview will creep in. So I'm gonna wrestle with that when we come back. So when we do come back, guys, it's just gonna be 60 seconds or so, and we're gonna wrestle with that question. All right, we'll be back. And welcome back. That was a quick break, and we have the best bumper music ever here at Stand to Reason. If you're listening, this is Stand to Reason, and no, I'm not Greg Koukl, so don't get confused, but I am Jon Noyes, the newest apologist here on staff, and I am having a ball filling in for Greg, who is on vacation in Wisconsin, hopefully catching a ton of fish and even more rest, because he definitely deserves it. He's a great leader, a great disciple, and I'm grateful to be filling in for him. I'm also here live with Tim Barnett. Are you able to speak, or do they have you muted?
No, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, this is all working out perfectly.
I'm surprised they unmuted me. That's great.
No way. I mean, this is if anybody doubts the existence of God, right here is an argument for the existence of God. All of our tech is working smoothly and seamlessly, and we're having a great time. Before we get too far in, I just want to remind our listeners that our fearless leader did an interview not too long ago on Focus on the Family. It's now available online for them to listen to. You guys have to go on and listen to Greg on the Focus on the Family. The way you can do that is go to www.focusonthefamily.com/episodes/broadcast. And you'll see it. Greg, he outlines the Columbo tactic, and for asking questions, he offers the self-defeating argument tactic to find holes in the opponent's arguments. He basically just goes through his tactics stuff, which I don't know about you, Tim, but before I worked here, before I even really knew Greg at all, tactics completely transformed the way I do apologetics, the way I do evangelism, really.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
I just did an interview on what's today? Today's Tuesday, right? Yeah, yesterday morning. It was an early morning podcast interview with the 3 guys from Arkansas.
Tim just froze on us.
Am I frozen?
No, now you're there. You're there. Go.
Okay, so we said
early morning interview.
Yeah, early morning interview called a podcast called Land the Plane, and we did a whole thing on tactics. And I told them that was a game changer for me. I started giving the tactics material talk before I ever came to work at Stand to Reason. So I was when they contacted me, I thought they were going to say, "Hey, stop using my material." I was worried, that maybe it's copyright or something, I need to stop giving this presentation. But they're like, no, it was the opposite. They really, they thought, hey, you should just do this for us, that kind of thing.
Before I got attached to Stand to Reason, I was just helping out in youth, and at the end, I did like a whole 8-week apologetic series, and at the end of it, my wife and I bought a copy of Tactics for every single student.
Oh wow!
And because I believe in the material. So, anyways, you guys make sure you go over the Focus on the Family, listen to the broadcast there, and then also if you don't own a copy of Tactics, you need to get online and get one right now. Let me think here. Actually. Greg's also. I got all these announcements in front of me, and I'm trying to strategically. What announcement do I do? I'm going to talk more about Greg because he's going to be in Stonegate Church in Midlothian, Texas, on June 27th. So go to stonegate.church and make sure you get involved in that if you are within striking distance of that church, because you don't want to miss Greg. He's absolutely unbelievable. He's really like one of the best communicators. He's going to be mad that we're talking so much about him, but that's okay. I actually really appreciate my boss. Okay, before the break, we're talking still about deconversion stories, these personalities who seem to hold they're cultural influencers, at least marginally Christian, all the way through to straight up evangelically Christian. I mean, they are Christians, and they deconvert. They through a series of events, whether it be arguments or an experience or lack of experience, they come out and say, "I am no longer a Christian." And we've been kind of talking about that, and then we ask the question, well, what exactly are you leaving? Because oftentimes the statements that these people are making don't necessarily line up with Orthodox or at least a robust Christianity. How about that? But there's another question I think that we really need to ask, and it's really important to ask, that I'm not hearing a ton of people asking is, okay, you're leaving this Christianity, but what are you leaving it to? Like, what's replacing it? Because you're asking all these good questions, and they're good questions. I cannot reconcile. I was listening to Jon Steingard, and he was saying that he couldn't he went on a missions trip to Uganda, and he worked among this group of pygmies, and he couldn't reconcile a good God with the immense suffering and pain that he saw within this community of people who have been displaced and abandoning children and all this stuff. Well, what does your new belief get you? Like, how does your new belief, how does rejecting God, throwing God off, how does that move you towards a solution to the supposed problem? And I think that we need to be asking these questions. Have you thought about this at all, Tim?
You know what? I have thought about it. And I loved, we were talking, and if I'm choppy, if I'm coming in, you just interrupt me, okay? And you can just take over. But I love I think the way you put it when we were talking is, I want to know what you're leaving, but I also want to know where you're going. And I think that they might say, well, I don't know where I'm going. And I guess that's fair, but not just where you're going, but where you're at right now. Like, what's the alternative to what you no longer believe, right? And so it's a really important question because everyone has a worldview. They're kind of like belly buttons, all right? Everybody's got one.
I knew you were going to say that.
Not everyone has a good one. Not everyone has a nice one. And so even the guy who says, well, I don't identify as an atheist, or I don't identify as maybe one of the common worldviews, they still have a worldview. Maybe it's a hodgepodge. Maybe it's like, I still got some of the pieces of the Christian worldview, but I'm trying to like fit them together with some of the, New Age worldview, and I'm trying to fit some other pieces from the naturalistic worldview, and so you end up with this weird puzzle of pieces that maybe don't actually fit together, a little inconsistent. So this is a really good question. So what is it that you now believe, right? And we want to be gracious. We want to be fair. Maybe they don't know, what it is. But this is where asking good questions and finding out where they're at currently and where they might think they're headed. Valuable stuff.
Yeah, it seems to me like oftentimes when they're wrestling, when I'm hearing them express themselves, especially in line with when they're wrestling with these larger issues. And I think that, like I've said it before, they are valid concerns. I mean, witnessing the atrocities of the world around us it's a valid concern for the Christian and non-Christian alike. I mean, we should be moved towards compassion, and that should move us towards questioning and even sometimes doubting, but as long as in the proper context, like we said. But it seems to me, like as I listen to people, they drop the objections, but they're not taking up anything substantive as far as a solution to the objection in their new worldview. Yeah. And it seems to me like all they're doing is they're fashioning gods after their new god after their own image and in their own likeness, and this just doesn't work because there's only one true God, of course. But I think that what's going to happen, or what's happening, is actually a lot of these people, I think, are going to end up finding themselves at the bottom. And it's gonna be exhausting as they set into a system of, well, basically this is what one of the issues with naturalism is. Yeah. The only solution to all these problems is ourself. Well, how do you solve the problem of evil? Well, more education, more money into programs, more X, Y, and Z, do more. Well, what happens when that stuff doesn't help because people have a sin nature, when sin is pervasive? Well, you throw more money at it, more education, more time, more programs. Well, and it's a cyclical thing that once you're in, it's hard to get out of. And these people seem to be abandoning in my mind, it seems like the only viable solution, especially to something like the problem of evil. Or then you look at the other objections, with the historicity of the New Testament and stuff like this. I just don't know where their thought process is on this because there's such good evidence. But they're fashioning a God after their own image ultimately. They're tearing down the God of the Bible and replacing it with a system that looks awfully similar to themselves. And I'm concerned for them. Like I said, it just doesn't really make much sense to me. Do you see similar things or?
Yeah, no? I completely agree. Just for one example, now I don't know John Steingard's position currently as far as morality goes, but I know that he did cite instance of terrible evil that he saw on one of his mission trips. Now, to me, it would be very strange if he now moves away from objective morality into some kind of subjectivism, because that's where his original challenge. That's what his original challenge is based on, some kind of objective standard, that this really is evil. There really is evil in the world. So it's kind of, this goes back to the famous C.S. Lewis quote where he talks about, as an atheist, his argument against God was that the world seemed so cruel and unjust. But then he asks, how had I got this idea of just and unjust? Right? A man doesn't call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. And so then he says, I could have given up the idea of justice by saying that it was nothing but a private idea of my own. That's relativism. But if I did that, my argument against God collapsed too. So this one of the chief arguments that you have that's causing your deconstruction, well, it turns out that that piece Now you're just rejecting it altogether. You needed that, to make your case against Christianity, and yet now you're saying, well, there wasn't any of that to begin with. There was no good or evil. Well, then let's go back to your deconstruction. You know what I'm saying? So there seems to be an inconsistency there. I don't know if that's what Jon does, but that's the kind of thing that we want to be looking for and asking the question about. So what are you leaving and where are you headed? And those are, I think, genuine, sincere questions that we can ask.
Yeah, I think so too. And we only have maybe 6 or 7 minutes left. I'd like to get back to the very practical, because you alluded to it earlier, and I think that you got this from you got it from the conversation between Sean McDowell and the genetically modified skeptic.
Yeah.
Okay, so our kids, right? We have kids about the same age, all girls between us. It's like ridiculous. All girls, lots of drama. They come to us and they say, "Hey, Dad, I think I'm deconstructing. My faith is kind of falling apart a little bit." I thought that what you brought up was really poignant, and there was 3 things. And the first one was, if I remember correctly, "You know what, honey? I love you, period."
Yeah.
I love that saying. I love you, period. And what do you have to say? Like, build on that.
Sure. So this is so Drew has a big channel. He's an atheist, and he just did a discussion with Sean McDowell. Very valuable to listen to his discussion. And Sean gets him to role play. Let's say you're a Christian, Drew, and your kids come to you and say, "Look, I'm deconstructing, or I'm deconverting, or I think I'm an atheist now. What do you say?" And Drew wishes that people would have said in his community, because he's coming out of that Christian background, "I love you, period. Not I love you, but
so cool.
this, and this. Just I love you. That's it. You will always be." My girls come to me and say, "Daddy, I don't believe what you believe anymore." I will say, "I will love you no matter what. No matter what." And so you are my daughter, like there's nothing that you could do that would stop me from loving you, period. Okay, that's the first point.
Yeah. What's
Second point. So Drew said, I never would have thought of this. I never would have thought of this. Thank you. Second point, not just I love you, but thank you for being so open and honest with me, for coming to me, knowing that I disagree with you, trusting me with your questions and your doubts and this process you're going through, and inviting me into it. Okay. So thank you. So the first thing is just communicating love. The second thing is just thanking them for being honest and open with you. Because I think there's a lot of young people who are struggling, and they don't feel safe going to mom or dad. They don't feel safe going to the youth pastor, because they think they're going to get, judged or whatever. Okay. They're going to get arguments beat down their throat or something. Bibles thrown at them. I don't know. They just don't feel safe. So I love you.
All right.
Thank
Tim,
you.
You're breaking up.
Okay. And you got the last one?
No, what's the last one?
The last one is set up boundaries for discussions. So there's going to be times where we can get together and talk. Not every time. We're not going to talk about Jesus every time, but we will talk. Maybe you can expand on that.
Yeah, it's I think the heart of this is really great. It's kind of setting up the boundary that you can trust that every time we hang out, I'm not going to bombard you with questions and evidences for the Christian worldview. We're going to carry on a normal relationship. And if this is happening with friends or whatnot, you don't have to be afraid of running into me in the street. We can have a normal time. We can go out and go bowling together, or we can go out and get coffee together, and we don't need to talk about this issue. But it's all provided that I'm going to be here for you though. So and also the other end of the boundaries, the other side of the boundary is there are certain times where I will want to talk to you about this because I love you. And that comes up to point number 1. It's all out of love. I love you. So I want to talk to you about these things, and I care for you, and I care for your eternal destiny, and I care for your soul, and I care for your mind. So I'm going to bring these things up. I just thought when you brought those up, man, I thought they were great points. And actually, this is kind of like you put words to what we do with my kids. I mean, my oldest daughter is a wrestler. She doesn't take anything on face value. She reads the Bible, and she reads certain portions of it, and she's like, "This cannot possibly be true, Dad." like talk to me about this, and it's fantastic. But there's boundaries there, and she's actually kind of set this boundary up. She actually says to me, I take this as a compliment. This is a badge of honor I wear. Sometimes she says to me, she's like, Dad, why are you always talking about Jesus? And I'm like, all right, yeah, I'll take that. Because if I'm always going to be talking about something, I'd want to be talking about Jesus. But she also serves as kind of a thermometer for me, where it's like, okay, maybe I'm laying it on a little too heavy for her. So, wow, this is like the fastest hour I've ever experienced in my entire life. But if you've been listening, guys, this has been Stand to Reason. I've been Jon Noyes with Tim Barnett here talking about deconversion stuff. Make sure you stay on board for our second hour. And we're going to be talking about something very closely related.